All right. Hey guys, my name is Cade Bonzel. I'm joined by my friend Andrew Duvall, and we just got done watching Batman The Long Halloween from 2021, and this is our review and reaction. So, Andrew, what did you think of the movie?
Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I admittedly am not hugely familiar with the Long Halloween story. I had heard of it, obviously, because it's one of the more famous Batman arcs, but I didn't know a lot of the details surrounding it, except for what my friend here has filled me in on. But overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this. It did not feel like a 2.5 hour movie, which was very good. That's a sign of a quality product, in my opinion. And as a big fan of Batman, I feel like this one felt a bit different compared to other adaptations. I like the fact that Two Face was the big bad in this one. I know it took a little while to kind of establish him and then kind of transform him from Harvey Dent to Two Face, but I don't think anybody will argue that he was the big bad. I like that it used some characters or some bad guys we don't usually get to see very often, such as Solomon Grundy, such as Mad Hatter. And other than that, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the art style. And all the voice acting was very good. I especially think John DiMaggio as Mad Hatter was a chef's kiss casting choice, as well as obviously Troy Baker will always be an excellent Joker. And one thing that I did definitely appreciate about this film is there's a lot to this story. There is a lot in this film.
There
But it
definitely
doesn't
is, and believe me, the graphic novel is even bigger.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel overstuffed. If that huffed, it doesn't feel like they're just cramming stuff in there for the sake of cramming stuff in there.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean because one of the reasons that The Long Halloween is my favorite Batman graphic novel is just the story. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot going on, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like they've stuffed so much into it. It just felt like, I mean, we have Batman, Gordon, and Harvey Dent as the three, I guess, heroes of the story, if you could look at it that way. And, a lot of it's also about his journey into Two-Face. It's also about how Gotham transitions from being run by the mob to supervillains such as Joker and Penguin and Scarecrow and Mad Hatter and Poison Ivy, like we've discussed earlier. And it didn't feel like they were shoving a whole bunch of different, I guess, ideas into one thing. It just felt like they were all just a part of that world and they just fit really well into that story and it just flowed really well. And I don't know what you thought, but I thought it was great.
Everybody had a reason to be in this story.
Exactly.
Solomon Grundy was the heavy for Two Face. Poison Ivy and Scarecrow and Mad Hatter started off working for Falcone, and then they ended up working with Two Face because they wanted to take out the big dog in the yard. Um,
Joker
Catwoman was kind of just doing her Catwoman thing.
Joker also wanted to take out the competition with Holiday, which I think was really interesting because I mean, that's an interesting motivation for Joker, when he says in the movie, there's only room for one homicidal maniac in this town. And yeah, it was good to see him in this as well. Poison Ivy as well, like you said. And I also really love what they did with Calendar Man. I thought this was such a good concept for his character.
It really was. I mean, obviously the Hannibal Lecter influence is pretty pretty front and center. But I think a character like Calendar Man does actually work in that kind of portrayal. This ultra intelligent, very detail oriented, kind of 5 steps ahead of you character works really well with that portrayal. So
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, all these characters just fit really well with the story, which again, I mean, this is one of the best Batman stories ever created, I think, and there's no denying it. But also one of the main things I loved about this movie was Batman's detective side. And that was just something that was so good to see. And actually, believe it or not, the movie portrays it a little differently from the comic. In the comic, he's a little better than at being a detective than he was in this movie. And I think that might have been intentional. But I still think it was good with what they did. And I'm glad that, again, I mean, this is obviously a comic that inspired the Batman from 2022, which we both absolutely loved.
yeah, you can. As somebody who has now seen both, there is quite a bit of DNA shared between the two, from the basic kind of like the backbone of the plot moving forward. there's quite a bit of shared DNA here. I mean, obviously, in this one, Two Face is the big bad, and the Batman, obviously, the Riddler is the big, you know, is the main villain. But yeah, there is a lot of similarities here, and I definitely feel like this was a very good story to draw from for the Batman.
Oh, absolutely. And I definitely think that the Riddler in the Batman was I guess he you could say he sort of filled the shoes for Holiday in that sort of story, which I think was interesting and how, his motivation to take down people connected to the mob. And honestly, people could say the Batman pulled anything from various comics, but instead of saying that it copies, I think it really just stays true to the source material is a better way of looking at it. And this is definitely something that it stayed true to. And if you could say that the Batman was a second adaptation of Long Halloween, I would say so. But yeah, I've always thought the Long Halloween just overall just one of the best detective Batman stories ever, and I'm so glad that they finally adapted it for, even animation or live action. I just loved how it turned out.
And I especially appreciate the fact that unlike the animated adaptation of The Killing Joke, this one was actually good.
Yeah, I guess that is one way of looking at it. But yeah, one of the other things I have always loved about Long Halloween is the focus on Two-Face's origin because, it's tend to shift from time to time how Two-Face got his face burned. And this has obviously been one of the more, I guess, iconic ways of how he burned the left side of his face. And overall, I honestly like how it's fleshed out a lot more instead of just, he goes to court and gets his face burned. It's a lot more about it's really expanded and it just feels a lot more organic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
So one of the other things I did want to actually talk to you about, just because, I have read the graphic novel and you haven't gotten around to it, was how there were a couple of changes made to this movie, to the story that needed to be done for the film, like to change the book. And I'll only tell you a few, but I could tell you about, the little ones. I could tell you how, like we discussed during the film, how Catwoman knows Batman's secret identity, which was not the case in the graphic novel at all. I can also tell you how, well, actually, this might surprise you. One of the villains who was in the story of the comic who wasn't in the film was the Riddler.
Okay.
He was actually in the story, he had actually been hired by Carmine Falcone to solve the identity of Holiday. And he was actually intended to be one of Holiday's victims, but the idea was that the killing was supposed to be committed on April Fool's Day, but Holiday left Riddler alive because April Fools.
Hmm.
But yeah, he was not in the movie, and I guess it didn't really affect the story too much of him not being there. But I will tell you this, the biggest change that I think this movie makes is the identity of Holiday, which, I mean, after watching this movie, what were your thoughts on the reveal?
Um, it felt a bit kind of, at least to me, it felt a little bit tacked on at the very end. I feel like this should maybe have been before Two Face turns himself in, and then kind of tries to cover himself, saying, "Yes, I am Holiday," and then Batman kind of just looks at him knowingly, like, "No, you're not. You may be deeply mentally disturbed, and you may be incredibly violent now, but you are not Holiday." So,
Well, I will say this, the reason why I brought up when we were watching it, I had pointed out to you, Holiday might be more than one person. And the reason I said that is because that was the case in the graphic novel. In fact, Holiday, it's never been officially confirmed, but it's been heavily hinted that Holiday was actually three different people. And here's how I mean by that. So in the story, it was revealed at the end that the killer, that Holiday, was actually Gilda at the very beginning, and that she had committed all the murders from Halloween to New Year's Eve. And it would turn out that Alberto, Carmine's son, had actually survived the killing, that he had, his death, supposed murder. And after that point, it was actually him who took over after New Year's Eve and committed all the murders afterward, which is obviously changed in the movie. But yeah, Alberto was in fact the one who took over after Gilda and started committing all the murders after that up until Labor Day. And it was officially, as we saw in the movie, it was Harvey Dent, Two-Face, who committed the final holiday murder. So it's definitely, yeah, when I first watched this movie, I was thinking, okay, so they're going in a different direction. Okay, I guess this is fine. Yeah, Alberto is definitely a big part of The Long Halloween, and he's also a big part of its sequel, Dark Victory, which I don't think you've read, right?
I have not read. I haven't even heard of that one.
Yeah, Dark Victory is the sequel to Long Halloween. It's also one of my other favorite graphic novels. It's fantastic. But yeah, a big part of it is really a direct sequel to The Long Halloween. And one of the biggest characters, well, maybe not just one, I think two of the biggest characters in that are definitely Alberto and Sofia Falcone, who we met in this story. But it seems though, Sophia has died at the end of this movie along with Alberto. And so they've said that the producers behind the movie have said that they're interested in adapting Dark Victory next, but I kind of feel like their Alberto and Sophia's deaths are really going to mess up the storyline for Dark Victory if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how they would handle that since it seems like two of their three major antagonists are, 6 feet under at this point.
Of course. And one of the other things that I also noticed that was different, and this might actually surprise you, is Gilda, Harvey's wife, her motivation for starting the holiday murders is actually very different in this movie as it was to the comic. In the comic, Gilda and Alberto didn't know each other at all. And it was revealed that the reason that she decided to commit all these murders, it wasn't about revenge against the Falcone family. And they talked about it in the movie was how Harvey just couldn't make enough time for his marriage because of his job. And she had started the murders because she wanted to make more time, Harvey to make more time for her so that he could finally have his time to start a family with her instead of being so committed to taking down Falcone. But which motivation do you prefer?
Well, I feel like revenge against a crime family that, ruined your life and stole your child from you is a bit more of a noble revenge plot as opposed to my husband's not spending enough time with me.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. But it's really when Alberto takes over in the comic that it really does become the revenge story against him because of how, he was treated by his father and sort of just cast aside and everything. So I guess they still kept that element in the movie from the comic. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I really have to say about the film. I think it's great. I think it's definitely one of the better animated Batman films that we've had in recent years and also just overall. I really think the studio behind this movie did succeed in making a faithful adaptation. And if they do eventually make a Dark Victory adaptation in the future, I'm down to see it. And we'll probably have to discuss that some other time. But yeah, I had a great time watching this movie, and I'm glad you did too.
Yeah, if you were to give it like a final rating, like 1 to 10.
Um, I think for me, I think I would give it a maybe a seven, 7.5, because I mean, it is good, don't get me wrong, but I wouldn't say it's up there with Mask of the Phantasm or a Sub-Zero or The Dark Knight Returns or Batman Beyond, Return of the Joker, which are all some of my favorite animated Batman films. But no, it's definitely I definitely give it a good rating if that's what you're asking. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And again, it's my favorite Batman story, so obviously.
All right. I would say probably around an 8 to an 8.25.
Oh, really?
Uh, Again, I thoroughly enjoyed it. My only real issues with it was again towards the end with the reveal of Holiday. Plus, at the very beginning, it is a bit of a slow burn at the beginning. There's a bit more of an emphasis on the Carmine Falcone thing and then the Joker aspect as opposed to the actual Holiday investigation. So, I mean, that's not a terrible thing. Again, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I just think maybe that could have been in the forefront a little bit more.
No, I see what you're saying. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'd say this was a successful adaptation. And I think, yeah, I hope they make more movies like this in the future. All right, guys. Well, I guess that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening, and hopefully, we'll have more to come. Thanks.
Yes.
All right. Bye, guys.